First of all, tell us how many years you served the city of Enid and how many city managers, mayors did you service during this time?
Okay. I think, so I came in '88 and I'm leaving in 2026, but there were 2 gaps and I think I'm gonna be 27 plus.
Okay.
Combining. And I think you actually have the information about how many. I know, I could list the people, but I went down it and stuff. It's something like maybe 10 or 12 mayors, and then I think 5 police chiefs, 4 fire chiefs, and maybe 8 city managers, depending on how you count, because some came and went and came.
Well, tell me, I know you played a very big, pivotal role in shaping the ordinances or the way we do things here in the city of Enid. Tell me some of the major ordinances that you have helped the city to bring forth.
We started in the 90s juvenile court, and so I had to write all those. And that was just when cities were beginning to do juvenile court, because juvenile court had always been a district court thing. So that's part of it. I also, having the animal control stuff, because I like animals and stuff, the dog parks and stuff. So I worked with Robert Hitt about creating the dog parks. And we actually have, which is interesting, we also designated some areas that aren't dog parks, but they are no-leash dog areas. So for instance, if you go to Government Springs South and you go past the ball fields, there are many acres before you get to the jail or the animal shelter, many acres and creek, and it's really pretty, and you can have your dog off leash there. And I think there's 1 or 2 other places that I just snuck in.
Okay, I love it. All right.
I also did, so for example, one of the things is, you have people that want to protest or talk and have signs and stuff. And so, and there is United States Supreme Court cases that will tell you where you can do that. But sometimes communities aren't supportive of that. So what I did was, so we've got, every city has something about you cannot block streets, you can't block sidewalks, you can't interfere with things. So one of the things that I decided, now other cities do it, but it's only the big cities. Okay, so what we've got is we still have those, that you shouldn't be asking people for money and blocking where there's traffic lights and stuff like that. So what I did was I put in, if you so desire, you can go to the police chief, you can explain what you want to do, what your protest or what your project is, and he'll talk with you, and then he'll write you out a letter that says this has been pre-approved. So one of the things, if they come, they usually come to City Hall, they usually show up at my office, and I say, you do not have to do this because prior restraint is illegal. This is not prior restraint. I'm just saying that, if I was going to do a protest, I would go to the police chief and get a letter so that then when, a nervous first-year police officer or someone stops and calls or they're saying they're going to call the police, well, you could call the police if you'd like, but here's my letter. So we have that. I think, Chicago and big cities, they have so many protests. They have a whole system. All we have is like one sentence in the code that says you can get pre-approved.
Okay.
And people have done that, and actually they've been very helpful. The other thing is, people don't know that if they're going to do something, either have a party or a walk or some special event, they can ask for a police officer. Now, it costs a certain amount.
Right.
Okay, so that's one of the little things. Let's see. I doubt people would be able to have 6 hens at their house if I hadn't come back. I'm pretty pro people. That's one of my favorite part of the jobs. Okay, so
you grandfather that in, correct?
No, it's not grandfathered. We have some people that are grandfathered.
Okay.
But the hen waiver was the animal control people said, we've got all these people and they just want a few numbers of hens and stuff. And I'd been doing ADA things for them if the reason why they wanted the hens was because, post-traumatic stress disorder, supposedly caring for animals is very helpful for that. Okay. So they asked for it and I wrote it up and it was easy and they go talk to the marshal and we do a check. And
were you part of when animal control became animal welfare, like changing that name? And
yes, most of the ordinances, there aren't any ordinances that I always review them and decide how to put them in and stuff. So I mean, the whole entire, at this point, practically everything that's in there, whether it was my idea or not, I've looked at because I've been here for so long.
Let me ask you another question about the ordinances.
Yes.
Do you guys regularly go through all the, go through ordinance and just think of, we have an old ordinance on the book for this, I don't know, hanging clothes on your, there were some weird ordinances back in the day. How often do you go through those and change them and clean them up?
Every 10 years we have to review all the ordinances and get them recodified. And we just did that, like in November of this year. So we go through that once every 10 years. And I find more than the young attorneys do. And here's the reason why. Because I use the books. And I do tell every assistant, and I also tell the code people, the thing you should do is you should get the code books and not use the online stuff. Now, I still, if I'm going to change an ordinance, I go to the online because then I don't have to type it all up.
Right.
But here's the difference. If you're using state statutes and you're flipping through, or you're using a dictionary and you're finding the word you don't know how to spell or you don't know what it means. If you're using a paper one, you're turning pages and you see different things. So one of the reasons why I'm like, oh, that needs to be fixed is because I'm actually flipping through the book and looking. Yes. And if you turn every page and you look, then you get more of the context. So one of the things that happens sometimes when people are new is they'll go to the website and they'll plug in appeals. This happened recently. They plugged in appeals and appeal time, and they found something, and it was something about when the MAPC was the traffic committee. At one point, if you wanted a stop sign, or it takes too long to get across this street, this needs to have the, walk thing longer. Okay, it used to be that all went to the MAPC as the traffic committee. Okay, that was like 25 years ago. Well, sadly, I had not caught that we had, if you go to the traffic committee and they decide something, you have to appeal it to the mayor and board of commissioners if you want a different decision than what they made. The only thing is they haven't been doing it for 25 years. So he was using, one of the new code people was, Carol, look, see this? And I said, okay, but look, I understand that, but you can't look at it in isolation. That's for the traffic committee. The thing that you're asking me about in like this other section of the code goes to the city commission, it always goes to the city commission. Zoning always goes to the commission. This is like adding a stop sign. And now we do that administratively. Oh, okay. Now if you were looking through the book, you would realize you're in traffic committee, not the MAPC.
Does the traffic committee still?
There is no traffic committee.
Okay.
Because now they just decide, and it's all. The other thing is, everything is computerized and stuff like that. I mean, probably a stop sign. So now what happens is somebody asks for something, and then it goes through and it goes to this development committee. One of the things that have changed is it used to be that every site plan and every improvement plan went to the MAPC, and now that is handled administratively. Now, if they don't like it, then they can go to the MAPC. But it happens in these developmental meetings that they have. And some of the old timers, you know, the people that have been on the MAPC for 35 years, they liked it when they got to look at every single one. But it's so, the meetings would have been, at this point, sometimes we have a lot of development, and they would be 4 hours long, and they wouldn't like that.
So just listen to what you just said, form some questions in my mind.
Okay.
My department, we try to educate and inform the residents on how ordinances or laws or statutes work, right? So it seems as if you can read what you have in the law, but it has to be interpreted. So that's a lot of what you do as an attorney, correct?
Yes. And there's rules. When you're reading a law, there's rules of interpretation and stuff that you will find in case law and stuff. And one of the things is the law retroactive? So ordinances or statutes, they can be retroactive, or which means certain laws, when they pass, they can apply to something that's happened back. Most laws are only prospective. And if you're going to make something go backwards, then you need to be explicit about it. If it isn't explicit, then it's only proactive. And it's because if it goes backwards, it's an ex post facto law.
Can you give me an example of one probably we've done in the City of Enid that we retroactively went backwards in?
Okay.
And does that grandfather people back then, or it say, look, how does that work?
When they decided that they were going to regulate livestock, one of the things that they wanted to do, and then they ended up trying to do it even though I told them that they couldn't do it, is that they tried to say, you have 6 months to get rid of your animals. Now, one of the things is that, good or bad, most of these people, they were pets, and they weren't really livestock. But the only laws in the state of Oklahoma at that point, because that was quite a while ago, is livestock. So livestock is a use, and uses are you can change, and you can say in R2, you are not allowed to have a horse in R2. You know, if it's residentially zoned, you cannot have a horse. But because livestock, farming, etc., is a use, they couldn't tell them. In one of the ordinances, they said, you have 6 months to get rid of your animals and stuff. But it's grandfathered because it is a use. If a use is a property right, it goes all the way back to Old England, and you can't do that for uses. So for another example, we have subdivision rules. And in our ordinance, it says, and I can't remember the date, but it's something like 1998 or something. It was last century. But we've got subdivisions that are really old. And so we've got a section at the very beginning of, I think it's Title 12, and it's all these subdivision rules, you know, like the depth of pavement, you know, what kind of mailbox, you know, all sorts of things. It says at the very beginning, for subdivisions that were developed after the date, and the date there is the date of when we passed Title 12, which has all these depth of this, width of parking lots, all the things that most modern subdivisions have. But for most of the east part of town, it doesn't apply because they were developed beforehand. So for instance, they've got the alleys, and there's good reason for that, because some parts of town, they don't have a driveway, or they have, I mean, there are parts of town that were developed and there were no driveways. And other parts of town where there is a tiny driveway and it's shared by two houses.
There may be some attorneys or judges, what have you, Supreme Court, whatever, that you admired and that you kind of fashioned your way of doing things, so to speak.
Okay.
Do you have any of those people that you admired or talk about them?
Of course, I have my, favorite presidents and stuff, but we won't talk about
You
that.
can say who they are.
Well, I love the Adams because they were so passionate. Of course, although my dad knew Lyndon Johnson and said that, he could be kind of gruff and crude, but he got through a lot of great legislation. Now, let's leave Vietnam and stuff separate, but the Great Society and the civil rights stuff, he did what Kennedy dreamed about. He got it completed and stuff. My first job was with Judge Alley, and he was a JAG attorney. He was with the Army, and then he was at my law school, and then he became a federal judge, and I was his law clerk, and he was always extremely fair, and he always looked at both sides. And that was also, my dad was not an attorney, but he did go to law school and he was an accountant and stuff, and he just didn't practice. And he always looked at both sides. But he was also kind of like the Adamses in that he had his own demons and stuff. He would get kind of agitated and stuff about things. He could get really mad at himself and at my brother and stuff. And so I would mediate. I'm pretty good about getting things resolved because as a very early age, I was always trying to, make things smooth with my dad, and the family. And so it kind of comes naturally and stuff.
I've negotiated all these cable agreements back since the early 80s.
When I came, I didn't know anything about municipal government, not a thing. But Bryce Kennedy was here.
So that is why the agreement that you see looks like the Blue Peak agreement. It's in order to conform with this section.
Very brilliant, very controversial, but was great. And he taught me a lot of things. As we went on, I would do the basic stuff and then he would do the big projects and stuff. Now, people either love Bryce or they focus on the controversies and stuff. He was brilliant, and I learned a great deal from him. I also do a lot of reading and stuff, and so I am a researcher. So I research and stuff, and also I was a history major. So I also dig deep into things and try to figure out why we've got a very unusual city. We have the police and the fire. They have their civil service commissions, and they're hired and fired. Now, it used to be all patronage. So in 1825 or something, all the jobs, you got elected, and then you hired your friends and stuff. And so it was all patronage. So one of the reasons why you wanted to be a United States Senator, back then, not now, is that you could get all your family and all your friends jobs. So civil service was something that first started in New York City, and Theodore Roosevelt is known for it. So we became a state during the populist, progressive era. And in the first years before 1930, every time there would be changes to the city council, the fire department and the police department, everyone would change. So they politicked and they put together a charter. It was first the fire department. And one of the things I wondered, in all my years, it hasn't had as many issues as the police department. And we haven't had the problems that the big cities have had. But I thought it was interesting that the fire department did it first before the police department. And they put in so that you get tested, and all the promotions and becoming one is all done by testing and stuff, and they have due process rights. Now, all city employees now have due process rights. We don't talk about them as due process rights, but back in the 1900s, we didn't even talk about due process, and the cases that have created due process and all the civil rights and stuff hadn't happened yet. Okay. By reading old newspapers and reading through like the histories of police and fire in Enid, I figured out why. One of the things is that back then, they actually lived at the fire station all the time. It was a small group of guys, it was all guys, and they lived in a station. And now they could take vacations, and some of them had family, but their job was to be there all the time. And, it was a small town, but, it was horse driven and stuff. And you can imagine how disruptive it would be if you've got your whole life set up and you're going to be a firefighter and you're doing this job all the time, and then you're going on Sundays to eat dinner with your children, and then a new mayor is hired. Is elected, and he decides all of them are gone. And then they have to wait another 2 years, and then they come back. So that was more disruptive for the fire department than the police department. But I think it was 8 years later, the police department did the same thing. One of the things that does is that the mayor and board of commissioners appoint the civil service commissioners, but the civil service commissioners, they don't run the two departments, but they can hire, fire, and discipline. So that is unusual. Most city managers are in charge of everything, and it all reports to them. But ours is a bifurcated system.
And it's part of the charter, correct?
Yes. In like 1947 or 48, I may be getting the date wrong. It was after World War II. They put in the Part D of the charter, and it was the city manager chart. And when they first put it in, every single appointment. Okay, so we've got the arts committee, and we've got like a library board, and we got a park board, and all of them were appointed by the city manager.
At that time.
Yes. And in 1955, they decided, we're going to appoint the people. All the employees except for the police and fire, but we also want to appoint, the library board, the park board, and so that was changed. At the same time that changed, they put in that the city attorney would be a hire of the mayor and board of commissioners.
Is that typical for cities too?
I won't say that it's typical. I think that lots of cities, the attorneys report to the city manager, if it's a city manager form of government.
Also want to point out again, in the event that you don't get selected, please don't give up.
Carol, did you miss one?
Attorneys are kind of independent, and, there's always going to be a little bit of tension there.
Yes, because the law itself is
Yes.
like you can't control that. Like they are the interpreter of the law, and they're the one that advises the city council and the mayor and the city manager.
One of the things that's interesting, when I came, there were some people that were worried about the fact that the police department and the fire department were separate, and they weren't being supervised by the city manager. Well, the city manager, and the mayor and board of commissioners control the money, and money controls quite a bit. But the other thing is that both of those entities, police and fire, there are so many rules. There's all these rules for fire departments and police departments. So I used to be asked, they could run amok. And I'm like, you haven't read all the laws. They are very, very regulated. They're probably the most regulated part of fire and police. For one thing, it is public safety. And there's state and federal rules, and we've got ordinances and stuff. So it's not like they're just doing whatever they want to do. They're doing what the statutes say.
Okay. So let's go back to
Yes.
is there any attorneys or judges you admired specifically?
Okay. Well, Judge Ali, of course, I really liked him. But he's a federal judge.
Supreme Court people.
Oh, I believe in government and stuff. And so, the Warren Court wasn't a problem for me. The justices who determined that Miranda and those kind of, and that people should, if faced with a serious charge, they should have an attorney. Those landmark cases, I studied them when I was in law school, and I love that court. They're good Marshall, and they're just tons of really good judges. There was a great tort justice, Justice Hand and stuff. There's some famous dissents. Now, I'm old, and I can't remember, but one of the things that's interesting is when you read constitutional law, there are these wonderful dissents. Oliver Wendell Holmes, I remember that he did a famous dissent. He did not carry the day, but eventually he did. So sometimes there are these judges on the Supreme Court that ride along defense and say, the court's wrong, and then like 30 years later, that's what the law is. At any rate, Linda Pickens is one of our judges for municipal court, but her husband was a judge when I came to town, and he was a district court judge, and I really enjoyed, being in front of him, and I've liked all of our judges. I mean, Judge Laddick is such a gentleman, and so was Judge Pickens, her husband. Linda Pickens is great, but we're talking about the district judges and stuff. They've all been pretty good, but those are I really the city had some issues about 20 years ago, and I asked Judge Pickens to be on the Police Civil Service Commission, and he had retired, and he accepted, and that was really. We really needed someone that would listen to both sides and understand the issues and stuff at that point, because it was kind of controversial, and I was pleased that he was willing to do it, and that the Mayor and Board of Commissioners. Now, there have been great commissioners and great mayors. Mike was a very good mayor, Mike Cooper. When I became city attorney, he was the mayor. But all of his work for Vance for all these years. I mean, he did it a very long time before he got paid to do it. And Ron Jansen, I think he's had like 3 or 4 terms and perfect attendance.
He has had perfect attendance through his 8 years on commission and his previous 4, which, Robert, you remember because you were serving as the city engineer back then. And so, Ron, come on up here. I want you, just like high school, I want you to get...
And what a dry wit. He would make just a little comment and everyone would laugh.
My wife says the reason for this is that we never go anywhere.
There've just been so many really good people that have given a lot of time. Like Jerry Allen was there many times. And the Ezell family, David Ezell had 2 terms as city commissioners, and he was on when I came. And then his wife had a term.
Unequal effects
and then Ben. For Enid, they are liberal giants. They're always thinking about civil rights and the poor and the less fortunate and stuff. And I know that they are controversial, especially Ben, but what a family. Every one of them serving, and I got to serve with all of them. And the danger of this is that I'll forget someone very important, and there's so many people that have given a lot. And it is free job. They do not get any money and get calls at night and stuff.
So what are you going to do when you retire?
Well, I hope that I'll travel some. And let's see, I've got all my animals, so that takes a lot of time. And so I'll spend more time with my animals, and I'll probably do some volunteer work. Now, I'm not that worried about it because when I was 50, I lost my job and I didn't have children, and I'm 50 years old, and very nicely, my husband's law firm said that I could kind of play like I was being an attorney at the law firm. I didn't work full-time and stuff, but I did all sorts of things. I worked at the Loaves and Fishes. I did work at Our Daily Bread. I did about every job at church. And when I was young, I wrote stories and poems. Now, I never stopped writing poems, never stopped doing my journal, but I hadn't written stories. And then during the time when I was only working part-time, I wrote stories and kind of wrote a long novel and stuff, and they've been some of them are still in fountain pen ink, which is, it fades with time. And but I went back to stories and stuff. So that's one of the good things that happened when I got fired, was that I had time and I started writing more. And so I need to finish some of those stories. And I mean, I don't think that they're ever going to be in print, but I could at least get them onto the computer so that, if someone wanted to read them, they would read them. But my problem is I don't follow a genre. So, they kind of get away from me. But I like doing that.
So do you think you'll do any consultant work for any cities or municipalities or?
I did some back then. So one of the things is I did actually do work for city after they, they would call me and I would do something, and Eric Benson had me work on the water system, even though,
Don't leave me, Vanessa.
I wasn't his idea of who he would want as city attorney. But I did do work for him. And Tony Puckett is a labor attorney, and he had me help out like one of the clients if they were having some sort of special hearing and they needed an attorney. And actually I went to high school with him and stuff. So I've told Gerald that if he has something that I will do it, but I'm not gonna work for other cities. I plan to retire, And most of the stuff that the city has me doing, it isn't really, it's not trying cases and stuff. It's trying to work out muddles or something like that. And I could do that, but I do plan on retiring and just doing fun stuff or helping. I might, do something with the Salvation Army. I don't know. Probably the SPCA. I might help out at the animal shelter because I really do like animals and stuff. But I also want to do some traveling.
Very good. Now, you did work with Del City, Miami, or Miami.
Oh, yeah. Those were the...
Carmen.
Yes.
Was that consultant work or?
Carmen is where my husband grew up, and they hadn't had a city code book in like 30 years. So someone called him and he said, well, my wife can do a small code book for you. So I did that. And then Del City and Miami and stuff, they were things that Tony asked me to do. So he was looking for a neutral person who could handle a complicated hearing kind of thing. And he asked me to do it, and I did those things. Most of the other stuff, I just worked for the people. If someone called and wanted a will, I would write one. And then I did work with Mr. Bigheart. The people that would ask me to write motions for summary judgment and stuff like that. Because I had been a law clerk, I write well.
Are you liberal or are you moderately liberal?
Well, in terms of like the 1960s liberal, like Ted Kennedy and stuff, I'm liberal. I believe in the safety net. I believe in unemployment insurance and food programs and Medicare and, that poor people should get civil rights, and they should get. There should be a safety net, and they should have health insurance. And I wish that Bernie's idea that everyone who should go to college could go to college. Most of the nations that are like us allow for people to go to college and not have to carry a lot of debt. Now, part of all that is partially because when I went to school, it wasn't that expensive. My mom kept my yearbook from Vanderbilt, and I was amazed at how inexpensive it was to go to, a private school that at the time I thought was very expensive. But now it can be $30,000 for someone to go to school. And Vanderbilt was, back when I went in the 70s, it is less expensive than the tiniest state school in Oklahoma. So it was, my room board and all of the fancy stuff at Vanderbilt, that was expensive, was like $2,000.
What year was that? What time was it?
77 through 81. And my husband, who went to Northwestern in Alva, he got a full scholarship to go there, and it paid for everything, and it was like $250 a semester. And now it is very expensive. Now, what has changed partially is that it used to be that for state schools, the state paid about 78% of it, and it has dwindled way down. So now, people who go to college have horrible debt when they get out. So, Bernie wasn't able to do it. I don't know how the nation would afford it, but when I got out of law school, I had no debt because my dad paid for it. So I guess, I wanted everyone to have my dad. And I think Bernie wanted everyone to have my dad. So that is the traditional liberal. I'm probably still very liberal. That said, there could be something weird happen, but I'm more moderate. And the other thing is, just because I would, that's not the job.
Exactly.
But part of the job is to try to have city employees and the elected officials remember that we're doing a service and the people are paying our bills, and that we should try to always use our better angels, what Abraham Lincoln would say. What is disappointing now is I think that our nation worked better when there were Democrats that were conservative and that were liberal, and there were Republicans that were conservative and liberal, because they all got along. And I'm very glad that our elections are nonpartisan. In a small town, people should be able to go in and talk to, the city employees and their elected officials, and we are all serving. You too are doing a service for the community as a whole.
So, how would you respond about, I would say, local, federal, state, tribunal government throughout the United States now? As you said, back in the day, there were two wings to each party, but now it's more like everybody's liberal here or everybody's...
One of the things that was interesting, when LBJ and Kennedy and some of the most conservative senators and stuff would, at the end of the day, they would go out and have a beer, or it was probably bourbon, had a bourbon with people on the other side.
Yes.
There were famous senators that would cross lines and get stuff done. And Ted Kennedy was good at that. And there were Republicans on the same side. John McCain also did that. I wish there was a little more crossing together. We don't have that problem here. we really are pretty good. Everybody talks to each other and stuff. And I actually think that's really important for the lowest part of government. Most people never meet even their state senator, much less their United States senator or the president and stuff. So what they will think of government is what they will see when they walk into City Hall. And I try to remember that. And I probably sometimes my staff thinks I give a lot more time and attention to just the people that walk in. But that's my favorite part because you can really help them. And some of our problems we have been working on for a very long time, and they're never going to be okay. And somebody can walk in and they're a little nervous, and I can make them not nervous, and then I can take them to the right department, and in 20 minutes, I've done something good. So at the end of the day, I can say, well, I didn't solve that problem that has been going on for 50 years, but at least I helped, Sarah or something.
Very good. What would you want residents in our community to understand about our service versus being political? Just like most people probably don't know, even on federal, state, and local level, the employees have never been political. They just do the job of the president of the United States or the governor.
Oh, yeah.
So explain that part to.
Okay, so what's funny is at one point, and I won't say who, there was, because he's actually still in politics. Okay, there was a guy that came, and he was running for a state office. And he came in and was talking to Gerald and myself. And he was telling us what he was going to accomplish and stuff. And he was talking about, his plans and that he was not going to cater to special interests and stuff. And, there's just way too much bureaucracy and stuff. And I smiled, and Gerald was liking it very much. And yes. And I said to him, now, if you're gonna go talk to city employees and stuff all over the state, you might realize that you're talking to two bureaucrats. And most city employees, and I bet state employees, love the bureaucracy. And guess what? I mean, if you don't have those people that have been around a long time, that are just sitting at their desks doing their job, then nothing is going, everything will fall apart. And he goes, oh, okay, yes. And then afterwards, I mentioned to Gerald, he never asked. He was very nice, and it was very nice that he came. But he never asked us about any of our problems. He never said, what are the biggest issues for the City of Enid? He didn't ask about Vance Air Force Base. He didn't ask about the water line. He didn't ask about anything. He just told us that he was going to, go ahead and do what was right and not pay any attention to special interests or bureaucrats. And I said, I'll give him a chance. But what I thought he was saying was he was talking to us, but if we called, we would be a special interest. And we need, to call and, have people care about our stuff. So the city employees are really the people that they do it day in, day out. It's that way with all the cities. And, we've got police officers and firefighters who have been here like 30 years and stuff, or more. And they keep things going. And there are direction. The direction the city goes changes with the elected officials, but it's smooth because of the city employees. Does anyone have any questions? Okay.
Passed with an emergency.
We're hopeful that it'll pass with an emergency.